As a culture, we are obsessed with sex. Who's having it, with who, and how often. But in getting all the juicy details, you might be tempted to see how your own sex life compares, and even find yourself a little insecure about how you measure up. Today, we're looking into the sex lives of others to see how much everyone else is doing the deed. We dig into sexy surveys to learn who gets it the most and how often really is normal. We'll also look at how sex affects our mood to see if there's an optimal amount for peak happiness and relationship bliss. All to get to the bottom of our rude question today: is everyone having more sex than me? That's what you're in for today on Impolite Society.
You're listening to Impolite Society with Laura and Rachel.
I want to do the whole podcast like this in her weird voice that she does.
Her fake, flat, deep voice.
Yes, we're going to change the world. It is a bold step forward.
It is a fake, bold step forward.
Yeah, an inspiring step. Yeah, she's like...
Inspiring step.
Yeah, and she like... Amanda Seyfried did really good in that movie, or TV show.
That's what I hear. Well,
you gotta check it out. Just like you gotta check out
Impolite Society. This is us. You're here. Welcome.
Right here, right now. These are the moments.
And we are the podcast that answers the rude questions that you cannot ask your new neighbor as you're both taking out your garbage, having one of those awkward shouting conversations from across your lawn. You know what I mean. That awkward small talk as you're like, hey, how's it going? Going good. You know what I'm talking about.
I don't know. I actually don't know what you're talking about. My neighbors know that we have this podcast, and so they've heard me talk about all kinds of rude things.
Well, I am Laura.
And I am Rachel.
And I've got a good question for you today, Rachel. One that I feel like we've probably talked about before in some area.
On a long, lost, lonely, happy hour that turned into a happy evening. That turned into Laura eating French fries, waiting till sober up to drive home.
I remember that very, very clearly.
I left you. I was like, bye.
Yeah, I'm like, I'm really freaking drunk and I cannot drive home. I will.
I'm done.
I'll get some $12 truffle fries and I sit here in Avenue and
that's bougie. That's bougie as fuck.
It's Clayton. Of course it's bougie.
I gotta kill 20 minutes. Why don't I get some truffle fries? Not just regular
it was way
fries.
more than 20 minutes. 20 minutes was not going to sober me up. We were talking at least an hour.
Oh, no.
Actually, I think this conversation probably happened during one of our work meetings. You know, we were talking about all the stuff that we couldn't talk about with our other coworkers, the kind of stuff that inspired this very podcast, where we were friends, we were just starting to get to know each other, and as two married women, I knew this topic was going to come up, and mostly because I would make it come up.
There's no escaping.
I've been married for about the same amount of time as you, but
Which is how long?
I have been married. Oh, shit. God damn it. Don't do this to me. 5 years?
5 years. That tracks because we just had our 5th anniversary in December.
Yeah, 5 years. But I've been with the same man for 20 years now. So I'm always wondering to myself and asking the rude question to other married women, basically, is everyone having more sex than me?
And I think that that's the question at the core of everybody's mind, where we're stacking up our sex lives compared to other people and determining what's a normal amount versus what's a not normal amount. And I know that this comparison has definitely reared its ugly head within my relationship.
Yeah, and I remember even wondering a different version of this question back before I was even having sex. I'm like in high school or something and watching one of those stupid sitcoms like Friends or Will and Grace or whatever. And the characters would be like, oh, I haven't had sex in months. And 15-year-old me, I'd never had sex, but I was thinking like, well, I haven't kissed a boy in months. should I have? I'm sitting there thinking that I'm already should be having more action than I was getting.
And that's so funny that you mentioned that, because I had a same experience as a kid, hearing them talk like, oh, I haven't had sex in 6 months. And I think, like you said, friends, and I can picture the scene with Ross complaining about it. And even then I was like, is that not normal? If you're not seeing anybody, I could not wrap my head around it.
It seemed perfectly normal to me from the outside looking in. And these are the things that creep in to your psyche and make you think things are not normal. And as I got older, became sexually active and attached, this question changed. It took on really new meaning. Because after those wild few months of the relationship where clothes are flying everywhere, I found myself wondering how often other couples were having sex. And I was always thinking, like, well, have they been together as long as we have? What's their relationship like? And it wasn't that I was unhappy with the amount of sex that I was having. I just wanted to know how it stacked up.
And there's something there, because I remember back to college, and there was this couple, and they weren't even dating. They were just what we called shacking.
Hooking up.
Yeah, hooking up. And I've heard it from like multiple people who were talking about how they were having sex at least once a day.
What?
I didn't know them well enough, so sorry that your business was spread all around like that. But in my college head, that definitely made me feel insecure about the amount of sex that I was having with my long-term partner. And this is a very, very worthwhile question, because I think that those kind of stories, they float to the top, and there's a lot of people underneath who are feeling insecure and feeling less than.
And so let's get into this and answer the questions for you and for me. Is everyone having more sex than me, or us, more specifically? So,
yeah. That's maybe a low threshold. Odds are probably, I don't know. That's a wrap.
Is exactly where my brain went to. So the first thing I noticed when I started Googling this topic was that every article started off saying, it's really not a good idea to compare your sex lives with other people. And immediately I was like, fuck that noise. This is America. God damn it. Everything is a competition, and I need to know very well health. So shut the fuck up and give me the numbers.
America, land of the free, home of the boning.
But it turns out answering this simple question of how often do people have sex, this was the Google search, it's not as simple as you think. I was expecting a really clear answer within a couple of clicks, but no, it was not going to be that easy. I had to do a ton of digging.
I imagine this one is not so clear cut because I don't know how often I've been asked it or how often people actually talk about it.
Exactly.
And B, we got kind of like the opposite of the loneliness effect, right? Where people are definitely going to be juicing up those numbers so they can impress some lab techs.
Some census taker, some sexual census taker.
Yeah, they'll be like, oh, I mean, obviously this person's very sexual. They're taking my sexual census. Like, I don't want them to think I'm a square.
So speaking of sexual census taker, I have to tell this story because it is the weirdest, funniest, most bizarre story I've ever heard in my life. My best friend, this was like 10 years ago, she got a phone call on her cell phone, and she was in the car with her friend at the time, and she took it on speakerphone like, hello? And it was like, yes, hello, this is blah, 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 blah from blah, 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 and we are taking a census today. And he's like, do you have time? And she's like, yeah,
why not?
Sure.
I'm in the car rolling with my homies.
With my friend and her friend too, Meredith. Shout out to Meredith and Katie, are just the most fun people in the world to be around and hilarious. So they can make anything just an absolute blast. And so she's like, yeah, sure, go for it. And he starts asking these questions that get progressively more sexual. Like,
oh no,
how many sexual partners have you had in the past year? In the past month? How many different sexual positions? And they are having a blast with this, you know, as you can imagine, answering these questions. And they're like, okay, great. Thank you for your participation. We're going to send you a $20 gift card. Da, 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 da. And then the guy calls back,
oh no,
I think like 2 nights later, and was like, hey, I'm really not supposed to do this, but I just couldn't help it. You were so sexy on the phone. Like, can you?
I don't think there ever was a survey.
Exactly. There was never a survey. And he's like, can you just, tell me about your experiences again? And I'm going to whack off. And she's like, what the fuck? Hung up the phone, obviously.
Yeah.
But I'm just like, who is this guy that gets these random numbers and does this as a hobby?
He just dials till he gets a lady.
Yeah. There's a certain amount of ingenuity there that I feel like you have to respect. Like,
Well, I feel like your friends actually probably ruined his time by being chill with it and just like playing it off as like, yeah, we're having a good time, buddy. Because he probably gets hard on grossing
like
people out.
Yeah. Well, then he has to call back and then gross her out and be like, and then she hangs up.
Yeah. It was unsatisfying, so he had to follow up.
Yeah, but apparently there's not enough people doing these sexual census
They
surveys.
gotta hire this guy. He's doing it for free.
He's doing God's work for free because nobody knows. I mean, one of the reasons it's so hard to answer this question is because it depends on so many factors, and you need to be comparing apples to apples, right? Because if you're married or single, if you don't have a willing partner at home in your bed, odds are it's going to happen a lot less, like Ross on Friends.
Yeah, and that was always something that I didn't get because people make fun of people in relationships or, they want to be single and play the field. But to me, the numbers just never added up there that you're definitely going to have more sex when you have a relationship.
And then another factor is how old are you? 70-year-olds are getting down a lot less than 20-year-olds. I mean, that's
Well, are they? Isn't there like an epidemic of venereal disease in retirement homes? I feel like they're pretty randy.
We'll look at those numbers and you tell me.
Maybe they're just not less likely to lie. And every 20-year-old's like, yeah, I get it all the time, every day till payday. Left, right. Poon is flying at me.
And another factor is how long have you been together? Those first few months, like I said, entire day is spent in bed. Come talk to me after you've been the same person for 10 years. If I would have spent my honeymoon just in bed, I'd be like, what the fuck are we doing here? Like, we've had sex so much. Why are we doing this all day now on my honeymoon?
God, I'm traveling to see the world.
Yeah, not to see your ass.
I can show you the world, baby.
I can show you the world. Thank you, Aladdin.
Yeah.
And lastly,
wait, I got a joke. And I'm sure you can, Laura, if you let someone ride on your magic carpet.
And lastly, are there kids at home? Because nothing puts a cramp in your weekend nooner like a crying toddler. Not that I would know or anything, but these are some of the factors that you'll have to consider when we think about how much sex is everyone having. And I found a lot of different numbers in my research, and it's hard to pin down. So I'm going to go through two studies. A 2014 study by the Austin Institute in Texas had some really nifty-looking graphs that were very easy to read, and I was like, this is really good. But I was like, who are these people? It turns out this institute is actually a religious institution, and they're the one that commissioned this study. But the study was carried out by GFK, who is actually a really big heavy hitter in the survey and analytics world. And I know this because I used to work for them, oddly.
No.
They are a big name, and they did this study. And it was larger than any of the other ones I could find. They had 16,000 participants, way more than any of the other ones, aged 18 to 60.
So I'm just curious, why does a religious organization need to invest in the power of a surveying organization when a God is everywhere? He sees everything. Just ask the big man upstairs.
They need to know. And it was kind of interesting.
If God wanted them to know, he would tell them.
They would already know. But what they found was that on average, cohabitating couples that were not married had the most sex. And that was about 1.6 times per week. And
giving that milk away for free. No one's going to buy that cow.
And married came in at number 2 at 1.2 times per week. If you were just dating, this was the third ranking with 1.1 time per week, which I think that's actually really good.
Considering if you don't live together.
Exactly. And unpartnered at 0.3 times per week. But if you multiply that out by month, that's almost once a month. So they're not doing too bad either, honestly.
Yeah, that's way more than I ever got when I was single.
Yeah. And their study also looked at these numbers across age groups, which was particularly interesting because in the 20-year-olds, those same rankings I mentioned, those were true. Cohabitators the most, then married, and down the line. But as the age of the survey respondees increased, the margins got narrower and narrower. So you can see like how the graph like starts with this wide spread, and then as the participants get older and it moves farther and farther to the
all
right,
around is less.
it just compresses. And so by the time it got to their 60s, they're all hanging around in the pretty much same part of the graph. No matter where you stood, it was less than 1 time per week, no matter what relationship category you were in. Unless you were single, that stayed pretty much like low on the bottom there.
So that's the thing. If you want to get laid, you have to go out and find a partner.
Yeah. Oh, shocker.
Sorry, players of the world.
Yeah, not just a partner. You're going to have to get in a relationship. If you want to have regular sex, whether you are 60 or 20, you are going to have to do some sort of committed relationship.
And then move in with them. Maybe that's what the lesbians are onto.
Yeah.
Just get in the house as fast as possible.
And the second study I looked at was the 2021 General Social Survey from the University of Chicago. And this is a pretty legit survey, but it only had about 2,000 people answer this specific question about how often you have sex. And it isn't cut by relationship status, but I think based on some of these numbers, we can
Glean.
we can make some assumptions. And also, you're welcome, everybody. I got really into finding this data after I could not find it in a simple Google search, and I did these calculations myself. That's right. I dug out the full data catalog for the General Social Survey. I pulled out Excel, and I typed in those numbers, and I got to crunching. And you know what, kids? You might think that all of those years learning Excel at your corporate soul-sucking job will do nothing for you, but I'm here to tell you, if you have a podcast and you are a big enough nerd, it will pay off.
I'm going to endorse your Excel skills on LinkedIn now.
Thank you.
She crunched those numbers.
So this data was super interesting because I compared it to 2018. There was 2021 and then 2018. And there was a huge change. In 2021, the largest group by far was the no sex category. When asked, how often have you had sex in the past year? No sex at all was at 30% of respondents of the 2,000 people.
Wow. Did they put the survey on Reddit?
But interestingly, like I said, that was in 2021. In 2018, that number was only 10%.
Oh, wow. So it tripled.
Yes. Pandemic, guys. It really kicked us in the nuts if you were single. This has to be single, right? You can't imagine that people shacked up, cohabitating, married or not, weren't having sex during the pandemic. This is totally the single people.
Yeah. I wonder, you could probably cross-reference it in that tabulation you have of how many percentage of American adults are single versus in a relationship. But I could also see where, you know, maybe there was some widowers and widows in that mix.
Oh, that's way to bring it down, Rachel.
That's my job.
That's like in the over 70 crowd. And this one, I don't know how old these people were. I didn't write it down. Anyway, bummer city.
Or divorces. I don't know. It could be a lot of things.
No one was getting divorced in the pandemic.
You have to live with them. I think a lot of marriages were strained.
They were definitely strained. I don't think they were divorcing, though. I think probably a lot of calls to divorce lawyers, but not a lot of actually going through a lot of financial uncertainty. You don't want to shake things up too much.
Well, that might be another rude question.
So the next largest percentage of people were in that 2 to 3 times per month category at about 17%. And that averages out to about less than once a week. So I'm like, okay, that's making me feel all right.
That sounds normal.
And then the next categories were pretty much tied at once a month and then once per week. That was around 13 point something % of people were in that category. And the more than 3 times per week,
the bunny rabbits.
Yeah, at less than 0.5%. So I was a little bit like, whew, that makes me feel a little bit better. So these numbers weren't too much different pre-pandemic, aside from that no sex at all. The other numbers were pretty much consistent across time. 2 to 3 times per month and once a month were the highest percentage of responders.
That's interesting. But thinking about the stages of a relationship, one time I was on a cruise.
Mm-hmm.
It's embarrassing enough to admit it, but I was on a cruise. And I was on this cruise 6 months after my husband and I got married. And we were enjoying some of the lovely cruise entertainment on the day at sea. And we were chosen to be on the newlywed game, which is
chosen. Jeez Louise, they picked you out of a crowd?
Well, we entered and we got selected. So they were... It was a newlywed style game where they ask you questions about your partner.
Oh, yeah. I love that.
But they had, obviously, a newlywed, us. They had a middle term and then like a long term. So it was us at 6 months, another couple at like 10 years, and another couple at like 20-something years.
That sounds fun.
It was a lot of fun. And they asked at the end, the grand finale was about the last time that you had sex with your partner. The exact phrasing was they asked about if you were going to compare your husband's equipment to a kind of car, what would it be? And then there was like the different categories. And then they said, and what was the last time it left the garage? We played right into their game with this newlywed stuff because we had said like earlier that same day. And like, of course. But the older couples, it's crazy because even though they live together, they're married, the middle couple said it had been like 6 months. And it's funny to hear the little exchanges they had too. Well, when they disagreed, we were the only ones that got it right. We were the only ones who had the same lineup.
Oh,
and
the same answer to that question.
Yeah, because I guess we had goldfish memory. Because I feel like women are getting pressured to say it happens more often. So they were snipping around it. Like, oh, it was the day our kids had like a sleepover or something. And then the older couple were off. They had different answers by years. and he was like...
He's like, no, in 2018, you jumped on this boat.
Yeah,
I remember.
And she was like, no, it was this date. And he's like, I don't remember. She's like, how much did you drink? And it was just so funny. It was just utter chaos.
And that's exactly as you see it. As the relationship goes on, less and less and less.
And I think that, some of that not having sex within the last year could be attached to some of those longer term relationships too, where everybody's in stress, everybody's high stress and everybody's in survival mode, where maybe sex kind of falls down the ladder of priorities.
Yeah, but at the same time, you're also locked inside with each other, and like you might hate each other, but you also have a limited amount of things to do. And that's actually going to play in again in our numbers, so keep that in mind.
Boredom.
So it turns out that Very Well Health, it wasn't bullshitting me. It really is bad to compare yourself to some average amount of having sex because there really isn't one. It's across the board. Looking at those numbers, it's a pretty big spread. But our numbers in both studies indicate to me that married people are having more sex than single people, especially that 2021 percentage. But it might not be as cut and dry as that, as Rachel made that good point. But I think it is pretty clear to say that the swinging single life isn't as much of a sex fest as everyone had made it out to be. And Joey on Friends was completely wrong. It is completely normal to go for months without having sex, whether you are unattached or possibly attached.
Yeah. Life is about seasons. Sometimes you have your horny seasons, and sometimes you have your Los Angeles for the last 10 year season. Just dry, arid.
No wetness. Gone.
Forest fires.
And this was all really interesting info, but I, as always, want to know more. I want to know if there is a universal average for sex across time, across cultures, or is America just not that horny? Because these were all Americans. So we're going to get into those numbers right after this break.
Hey, it's Rachel.
Heyo. Laura.
We just figured you couldn't get enough of this, but we had to take some time to say a very special thank you.
Yes, we want to give a shout out to reviewparty.com podcast. They left us a fantastic review on Podchaser and sent us a super nice message, and we really appreciate it, guys. And we also wanted to throw some listeners your way. So listeners, if you want to check out a podcast that talks about internet reviews that are really funny, those Amazon reviews that just really kind of make make you chuckle and wonder even what's going on with Amazon's choice versus bestseller, all the ones that they recommend to you. They've got some interesting podcasts for you, so you should definitely check them out.
Also, shout out to listener Jeff Banner for leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts. Every review helps us. If you have a couple seconds today, please spare a second or two to go out and give us. Please, sir, can I have some more reviews?
Oh my gosh, if only. If only. Yeah, go out there and leave us a 5-star rating and a written review, and we love you. So the studies you found, Laura, very good, very scientific. The numbers, so many numbers.
So much crunching.
Like I could hear from all the numbers being crunched. But they do only tell us about a time and a place, right? The U.S. and the specific times that the surveys were administered. But humans, we've been around a long time.
And I wanted to know about how it trended through time. And I have some data on throughout time, but it's super, super recent. So what I was really curious about was what is normal or natural for humans. And because we're all about evolutionary biology around here, I wanted to know how often cave people, which I consider to be the most human of all humans, got it down. I wanted to know. But unfortunately, GFK, they did not exist in cave days. There were no sexual census takers calling people on their cell phones and asking them surveys about how often they got their freak on. And no one was painting it on their cave walls. Or at least if they were putting notches in their cave walls, nobody today knows what they were, and they're just thinking that they like to draw sticks. I mean, maybe that's what all those lines actually are.
How many times? How many days since I last serviced Ugog? And before I need to get back on my back here. If I had to guess, I know that there's no way to know, but I can speculate wildly. Another thing that the cave folks did not have, in addition to a bedpost to put their notches in, was a Gregorian calendar. Like, they did not understand the concepts of weeks. So I would imagine that they did not measure their amount of fornication in a week. I bet it was in a lunar cycle, because that aligns with the female menstrual cycle. Yeah. So I bet there was a lot of fucking when the ladies were ovulating. But in the rest of the month, they're probably like, no thanks.
No, thank you. And I would agree with that. And I think that it's probably a lot more than we do in our modern society.
Life is short. Live hard, die young.
Exactly. So that's kind of my theory, bonking Olga on the head and bringing her back to your cave dwelling. But nobody really knows for sure. It's all huge speculation. And even as we get into pre-modern history, it's really hard to know because people didn't really talk about it. They talked about sexual encounters. You can find writings about that. But about frequency, that is just not something that anyone was collecting. It's kind of this don't ask, don't tell how much you're disobeying God's laws. Nobody wants to know.
But if you were a married couple, then that is enacting God's laws. It's just the reason why I imagine the Institute of Austin or whatever wants to know, because they want to know how many more Christians they can breed.
There's still taboos around sexuality, even if you're married. Talking about how often you hide the sausage at your bridge club is, well, I guess not bridge club in the Middle Ages. I don't know. What did people do?
Oh, I think they talked about it. I think ladies talked about those kind of things.
Oh, I think they definitely talked about it too. But nobody was writing it down for us to look at.
No monk, no Gregorian monk is like putting it in his manuscript.
Was taking the gossip down.
Because he was just super jealous. He wasn't getting any.
Precisely. But what we can do is look at some cultures across the globe to see how much sex everyone else is having, aside from America, to find out if there's any kind of average or not so average. And this was also really hard data to find.
Well, that's obviously because the guy who called your friend is not fluent in very many languages. We can only have him call in English-speaking countries.
God damn it. This guy, he is doing the world a service. We need to find more like him, train him in multiple languages and just get to dial it. Automatic dialer. See how many single women you can get to talk to you about how much they're having sex. Gosh. But what I did find was the top 10 countries for the average number of sexual encounters in a year. So the top 3 countries were number 1, Greece. Number 2, Brazil.
Of course.
And number 3 was Russia. And this is where it comes back to, I think, that nothing better to do. I think that this is a boredom issue. I mean, Russia is pretty fucking cold in the winter. You don't want to go outside? It tracks to me.
If I had to guess, if I had to associate a theme, or at least a guess, a hypothesis, if you will, onto why certain countries are more randy than others, you have your winter theory. Mm-hmm. My theory is looking at more maybe traditional or more patriarchal groups, because I know in Russia, women are kind of very submissive to men. Mm-hmm. So I can imagine that in a culture like that, there is going to be sex had more often. Maybe not.
I think Greece is also pretty masculine dominated.
Yeah, yeah.
So I don't know much about Brazil. I always think of Carnival, which is like sex
that's because everybody's like hyped up sexually 24/7.
Yeah.
How could you not be? It's Brazil. Asses everywhere.
It's such beautiful asses.
Exactly. You can't help it. You can't help it. But the other two, I would think that there's more sex because it's more patriarchal, it's more male dominated, and they are instigating the sex. It's not like the sex that maybe we would experience here in the United States of America. And if you're Russian and you want to tell me differently, tell me differently. This one time in Russia, our tour guide was talking about the art, and she was like, oh, back in the day, talking about the women that are being painted, they were like, back in the day, men liked women with curves. But then she said, today, the men want us to be thinner, or we have to be thinner for the men. Or
I
something.
think of Russian women is very tiny.
Yes, and very like trying to appease men. So I could see
lots of makeup, short skirts, all that kind of thing.
I saw a Russian date, and it was the saddest thing in the world. Not so sad, because I shouldn't say that. This woman was decked out, looked beautiful, like a picture from a 1950s. Who's the famous painter? Norman Rockwell. Like she was wearing like an A-line skirt with a matching jacket, bright red. She might have had a hat. I might be making that part up. But she looked like a character from the Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. And she was sitting on this bench with this guy like who was wearing like Adidas sweatpants.
he's wearing the Slav Squad outfit.
Yeah. And she looked like a painting. Like beautiful, so thin, gorgeous outfit, perfect posture on top of it. And I was just like, I'm so glad I don't.
The guy you're going to date.
Because I think there's more men. No, there's more women than men, so they have to like compete harder. And that's why they do the online mail order brides, because there's just not enough dudes. Which I'm probably because they keep sending them into foreign countries to die.
Weird.
What, Russia? When would they do that?
I think that's an interesting theory about the more male dominated. And I mean, looking at the rest of the list and how it tracks. So we have the top 3.
And India's on there.
As we go down, we have Poland, India, Switzerland, Mexico, China, New Zealand, and then Italy. So Poland, I don't really know much about Polish culture. India, I know, is very male dominated. Switzerland,
that's
not
an outlier.
So much. Yeah, that's
just because they're so rich and luxurious. They're just like, we have nothing but time.
Scandinavian countries have a lot of sex.
Yeah.
And then Mexico
Switzerland
and China.
Isn't Scandinavian.
Oh. What is the Nordic blonde
Swedenland. Sweden, Finland, Norway.
All those blonde people.
But they're not on the list.
Yeah,
Switzerland's on the list.
But then Mexico, China, definitely.
We gotta crunch those numbers again.
Shut up. And New Zealand, I know nothing about that, and Italy, I think, is also. So I don't know. I don't know. I don't know enough about these cultures to say for sure that is or is not true. But it's a good theory. I like it. So looking at these numbers about average sexual encounters per year per country, the high end on the list is about 3 times per week. And then the low end is about 2 times per week. So it's interesting to see that even amongst these top 10, there's not like a huge spread in the numbers, right?
Nobody's at like 10 times a week.
Exactly, compared to everyone else. Yeah. But we know that the US is not on this list. But again, it really does make me see that there isn't a universal right way to have sex. It's very cultural. It's very unique to the individual. And in the US, we say that we should be having all this sex. We say we want to, but we also throw up a ton of stigma on people who sleep around. And that's men and women. Women, I think, get it harder, but I think men too, because I mean, if you're telling me you've had 16 partners in a year, I'm like, what the fuck? Like, dude or girl, it doesn't matter. I'm like, yo, a slut. So,
that doesn't bother me so much. It's like, you do you, honey boo.
But I guess the question is, which is it, America? Do you want us to have sex or do you not want to have sex? What is the cultural pressure here? It's to have sex, but not have sex too much. We really don't know what we want.
Oh, I've got it figured out, because they want you to not have sex so that you're real horned up so that they can use sex to sell you things.
Oh,
because we love it, but we can't have it. So,
that's a little bit too real.
And now I want a Hardee's hamburger.
God, do they still make those awful commercials? I don't know. I don't watch TV anymore, but
I don't know. I couldn't tell you, but my guess is probably.
But America, we want the burger. We want the sex. We want to sell us the hamburger with the sex. We really don't know what we want because our sex drive is actually declining. The National Survey of Sexual Health and Behavior in 2018 has found since 2009, all types of partnered sexual activity is down. No matter if you're single, cohabitating, or married. Sex has gone on a downward slope, and Rachel is cheering.
That is the victory for all of us out here who
and
who only want to have sex on the weekends.
Sex, what is it?
That's
we
the
say
America
that all the time.
I aim for, that I'm building with my agenda.
That's the real liberal agenda.
Why do you assume that? The liberals want to have more sex. They want to have sex with anybody, regardless of what gender they are, what identity they have. They're talking about all kinds of sex. I would say this study wouldn't make it in, but if there were just going to do a study between conservatives and liberals, I would say liberals probably have more sex and more satisfying sex.
Oh, more well, the sheet with the hole cut in it, it does really cramp your style. But it's what Jesus wanted.
Does it provide a nice sweat barrier?
Soaking it up. But what's interesting is the decline is most obvious in teenagers. And there's this part of me, the part that went to Catholic school all my life and was told that her flower is delicate and need to be preserved. That part of me is thinking, good. And then there's another part of me, that evolutionary biology part of me, that is thinking, well, that can't be good. Like, for us as a species, right? That is when you are the most sexually potent as a man and virile and the most like horn dog. So it seems like very incongruous.
Yeah, and I have theories on that, but I'm sure we'll touch on it. But like you said, you were told that you have to protect your flower and cherish it. And, maybe people aren't out there getting their petals pounded, but these teenagers certainly are probably taking a lot of nice little photos of it and sending it around, because I think you can't deny technology's role in these changes.
And it's also a factor that teenagers are experiencing a maturity delay in pretty much every aspect of life. They are waiting later and later to get driver's licenses. I've seen that with all of my nieces and nephews.
And they write a whole song about it.
They are waiting later to have a first girlfriend, a first kiss, to get a job. All of these things are happening later and later in their lives. And even drinking. That was something they talked about in the article, that they're not getting drunk anymore. And I'm like, I was 16 and 17, like just clamoring to get my hands on alcohol, and they just don't care. They are graduating to adulthood later and later in every way possible.
Yeah, talk about a bunch of buzzkills, those Gen Zs. But no, it totally makes sense, and it's funny because I like to hearken. It reminds me of what we talked about when we talked about domestication in the pets episode.
Yes!
Where it's like delaying a mental maturity, or like keep living in a more like infantile state. Neonatony, I think is the word.
Neonatal, or no, you're right. Neonatony, something like that. Yeah.
Neoteny. But it's like we're doing that to ourselves, and it's funny because you've seen it evolve over the last 100 years. Because in the early 1900s, there was no such thing as a childhood, and then childhood became a thing, and then in the 1950s, we invented teenage years. Like that became a concept. And I think we are living through now the creation of another phase of life called the young adulthood. So your 20s are now not a decade where you should be marrying and settling down and having a family.
Or just like getting a job and figuring shit out.
Yeah,
They're just like dicking around.
It's a time for
what a privilege.
Self-exploring, figuring out who you are, who you want to be, and all that kind of stuff.
Jeez.
Which I skipped that.
And there are some theories about why even married couples are having less sex than we did 10 or 20 years ago. Porn is one of them. Online dating, online interactions.
It's harder to meet up.
Yeah, and not getting to know people in real life. And some other people say that they're too broke. They're like, I'm just too stressed about money. And I'm like, okay. I mean, come on. It's free.
There's been a lot more poor people throughout history who have had sex.
Yeah.
Who've had made time for it.
The one that really resonated for me was the busy effect. And I think that we've talked about this before on the podcast, but I could be wrong, is that in America especially, we glorify being busy. We glorify that hustle, whether it's working longer hours, taking your kids to a zillion after school activities and all these play dates, running stupid errands to get all that stupid shit that you really don't need at Target. It's just, we schedule ourselves so tightly, and we go because it makes us feel like we're achieving something. Like that's what society tells us.
Yeah, idleness is unethical in American society.
And when we do actually have downtime, we are so exhausted, either physically or emotionally, from our hustle. We are turning on the TV or opening up our phones and just zoning out. And I am so guilty of this. The TV is my brain numbing drug. You just turn it on and you can just not really exist for a while. Like you're here, but you're not.
Well, and I think technology plays an equal role in that kind of breakdown because there's always something to distract us. There's always something to entertain us. Where 50 years ago, you watched
had to find your own entertainment.
Sort of, right? The news ended. The TV went to that random screen, which kiddos wise up. Yeah. That happened. TV turned off at some point.
I think it would end with the Pledge of Allegiance, and then it was gone. That's what I've heard.
Of course, that's
anyway.
like the most American thing. Jesus Christ. So you turned off the TV after the news. You like got ready and went to bed with your spouse, and you both sat there sitcom style with the bed lamps on and a book.
Reading a book, and then you're like, I'm bored, and then a hand wanders its way over.
Which, that's, I mean, I don't know if I'm airing too much of my business out there, but my husband and I go to bed at the same time, probably less times in a month than Brazilians have sex.
I mean, I honestly can't say that Austin and I go to bed at the same time. Seriously, it might happen once a week. We go to bed at the same time. Like it's...
And ridiculous. I mean, I think once a week would probably be the most for us. And even still, that one time might be on a Saturday after we were out with friends until 1 a.m. We just come home and crash. I don't know. Again, it might be putting too much of my business out there, but we're more of an afternoon delight, folks, you know.
So going back to the role of technology in this decline, fun fact here, the debut of the iPhone in 2007 and its rise, it really coincides with the timeline of sexual decline. So I think that's pretty telling.
And it begs the question, is the future a world where we don't even have sex with other humans? We just have sex with machines or use machines to mentally stimulate us enough?
Westworld style or Demolition Man style, where like you put on like this like brain stimulating thing.
Yeah.
Ugh. I don't know about that.
No doubt.
And that's the thing. I'm at war with myself about this kind of thing because we're getting more sexless, and some part of me is this good that makes me feel better about myself, like that I'm not a freak. But then the other part thinks that it's not good. It's not good for our species. But really, does it matter?
So, Laura, you're like saying that sex might have other benefits than just getting us off?
That is exactly what I'm saying. Because some people say that sex can actually make you a happier and healthier person. We're going to find out if that's true right after this little break.
Hello, this is Lafayette.
And I'm Carlos.
From Nerds Talking the Podcast.
That's right.
Where we talk about everything from UFOs,
Yep.
comic books,
I like that.
movies, streaming services, conspiracy theories, ghosts, video games, and more.
Kick ass.
All on Nerds Talking the Podcast.
You can find us every Friday with new episodes on all digital platforms where you find your favorite podcast, Nerds Talking, the podcast.
Now back to the show.
So if I was never to have sex again in my life, it just like
Never. Done. Closed for business. Curtains shut. Sewing them up.
would that sewing them up? What's them? Plural?
The lips.
Oh, I thought you meant everything. And I was like, I gotta eat. Or no, I don't. I'll just have smoothies. Smoothies. I'm obsessed.
So you want to know if you stop having sex.
Is that going to make me a less happy person? Because sometimes I'm like, maybe I'd be happier. Maybe I could let myself go then.
Well, I think that's a normal question. Are you missing out on some great source of happiness if you're not getting laid 3 times a week like the Greeks? And I'm wondering if it's like taking a stupid walk for your stupid mental health, like that TikTok. Should I just do it and expect all these emotional benefits to come rolling in and I'm just enjoying every second of it? Well, yes and no. Everyone is telling you that the more sex you're going to have means the more alive that you're going to feel, and it's backed up by a good amount of studies, honestly. But additional studies have been done, and it shows this is not quite as cut and dry as we like to think it is. It's kind of a chicken or the egg situation. Are happier people having more sex because they're lighthearted and not emotionally in the dumps over that stupid email they got at 5 p.m. on Friday? Or are people happy because they have sex and then they just forget about that annoying 5 p.m. email?
And this reminds me, again, we're apparently a lot of our sexual grounding moments happen when you're a teenager. I mean, maybe not if you're a Gen Z, but for us old folks. I just remember there was that late night sex therapist.
Oh, yeah.
And
Sue Johansson, Sunday Night Sex Show.
Yeah, and she at one point said, ladies, it doesn't matter if you don't want to have sex. Just have sex and then you'll enjoy it in the moment or you'll feel better after. So like it literally is going to the gym or going on or exercising.
Taking a stupid walk.
Eating a goddamn salad.
So one study that I read, they found that the well-being boost that you get from having sex, it caps out at once per week. If you do it more than once per week, you are no more happy than those who do it only once. So if you're doing it 3 times like the Greeks,
overkill.
Overkill.
Energy
you're not
wasted.
Any happier. But on the flip side, if you do it less than once a week, your happiness could be boosted by doing that horizontal tango a little bit more often. So take that for what it's worth. Another study looked at affection versus sex. Was it actually a penis in a vagina that's really making people happier?
Whoa. It's 2022.
Okay, all right. Don't stop. I'm sorry. I don't want to be heteronormative. PC police. Yeah. Is it? I don't know. What's a way to make that more universal? Is
it having sex?
Okay, let's make it as generic as possible.
Yes.
Is it having sex that's really making people happier, or the fact that they were connecting and sharing with a partner?
I think that's a really good point, because you would have to compare the sex study with another masturbation census study that said if you're rubbing one out once a week, are you as happy as somebody who's having meaningful stare into your soul missionary sex with their partner?
Yeah, that's a really good point. That would be a really interesting study. I didn't come across one like that, but I might go searching for it.
We should create an Impolite Society research center.
Research group. Yeah. Just get a bunch of people to whack off for the podcast.
Just let me know. Does it boost your mood?
Well, I'll get on GFK. I'll get back to my connections at GFK, and we'll start that research group. But this study, they looked at groups of couples and examined their behaviors outside of the bedroom. The couples that kissed, cuddled, and hugged more were happier than those who just had sex once per week. And I think this is a bit of a no-brainer. If you actually like your partner, you're going to cuddle with them. And liking your partner makes you happier than having sex with someone that you don't like, even if you're married with them. Married with them?
My wife, I am married with her.
But I think that there's something there beyond just that connection. There's something going on there.
Well, this is my hot take, because is it people who like their partners cuddle more, or can you trick your brain into liking your partner more by cuddling and having sex? Because
probably
that's what I've found. So when my husband and I, when we're out of sync, when we're getting under each other's skin, when we're nitpicking each other, we're like, oh, it's time. Let's go upstairs. And
really? That's interesting to me, because I find the exact opposite. The angrier that I get, the more I'm like, don't you fucking touch me.
Well, and then you gotta fight that inclination. At least that's what we've had to come with. Because when they're the most annoying, that's when you're like, oh, we need to reconnect and get some of those love hormones going, some of that touch hormones going. Because after, everything's breezy, easy, more cuddly, more affectionate showing. And the thing is, it's you could make that happen, right? You don't have to wait for those feelings to come over you. You can, create them. Yeah. And I think that was a hard pill from my feminist ass to swallow, but it was definitely a lesson learned.
It is, I think, taking that walk for your mental health. But I think that in that study about the cuddling there is some wisdom there, is that sometimes if you don't have energy for sex, a cuddle or a lie down can form those same bonds. Maybe you don't have to go to the bedroom if you're really at each other's throats. Maybe you could just have a cuddle or a lie down, that you could have this same connection doing that. Or if you just went to town on the wedding buffet and you just can't bust another move that night, no worries. You can just cuddle. You might get those same kind of benefits. And this is not just true for women, by the way, in the studies that they did. The same thing is true for men, as long as they were over 35. And they specified that. They said middle-aged men, because an 18-year-old is not going to fall for this shit.
They're going to my balls, they're ballooned.
Literally.
And I think that kind of plays into the same thing too, where you can be purposeful about how you interact with your partner to kind of manufacture or create those feelings of physical affection. You have skin to skin time with your baby. Why wouldn't you have skin to skin time with your partner? Because we're all just big old apes running around here.
Absolutely.
Pick at their hair, scratch their back.
I remember, this might be a little TMI for the podcast too, but I remember the first time that I took my shirt off with a guy and it was chest to chest. That was such a powerful thing to me.
Yeah.
I was just like, this feels fucking amazing. I was like, the kissing is great. The other stuff is great. But bare chest to chest with somebody else, I was like, this is nice.
Yeah. Because the warmth, and it's what we're meant to do. Yeah. We're just little tree monkeys who just want to hold on to each other. But our society is not built that way.
It's put on clothes.
But also,
Don't
like,
touch.
please don't touch me, people. Like, I say that, like, I know
You
it's
don't want to
good.
go chest to chest with me, Rachel.
No, like, actually, nothing. I want nothing less than that. Nothing. Did that make sense? Did I use that right?
Yes, I think so.
Okay. No offense.
So, none taken. I know who you are. I'm cool with it. So, back to the rude question at the top. Is everyone having more sex than me? Than us? The answer
not
is...
together. Not just- the answer for that would be yes, because
we are having
where
none.
no chest to chest is happening.
Well, the answer to that question is maybe. People in Greece certainly are, but in the U.S., among your neighbors, it's hard to say. People are very different, and what works for one couple doesn't work for another. All relationships are different, and there really isn't an average to compare yourself to. As much as I railed against it at the beginning, I did all this research, and I thought I would come to a different conclusion. Nope, turns out the fucking articles, they were right.
And if you want to win, because we mentioned we're competitive,
Winning.
if you want to win, just start giving all your friends and family iPhones for Christmas and birthdays. And just,
You are going to just see your numbers start to climb.
you're like, oh, wow, you haven't had sex in 3 months? I have sex every day because I threw out my Apple iPhone. Sorry, Steve Jobs.
And I think another thing for people to think about, if you are in a relationship and you're not happy with how much you're having sex, you can change it. That is another thing. If you don't think you're having enough sex and it genuinely bothers you, then yeah, you aren't having enough sex. And if your partner isn't happy with how much you're having sex, well, maybe you might want to take that walk for your mental health. And I read an article once years ago when I was worried about my own sex drive, and it suggested doing something simple, something small to connect yourself to your body, like go for a walk, play Wii tennis, just like dance a little bit to a song, sit outside and feel the breeze, anything to remind yourself that your body is not just the meat sack that lugs your brain around. Your body can be a source of pleasure for you. So anything that reconnects you and grounds you can be good for your sex drive and find yourself more and more interested in what pleasures your body can give you, whether that is sex or just simple pleasures.
Yeah, I think that that's something we could all take advantage of, reconnecting with our bodies. But I did also want to say, you don't all have to have 100% what your partner wants.
No,
there's compromise. Like if you're not happy,
Always.
first step's conversation, and then figuring out what works for you. Because we've been on both sides of the equation where we were all in one person's court and not in the other one's, and it's about meeting in the middle. That's everything about relationship. And also lower your expectation, everyone. I was going to say guys. But if you think everybody else is having daily sex like that couple in college, no, you're wrong. Not even Brazilians. And like, if only we looked like Brazilians. That's all I got to say about that. If only.
If only. I think that's a good place to leave it. And so there we have it. Another rude question in the books. What do you guys think? Do you think you have more or less sex than other people? Let us know. Send us an email, rude@impolitesocietypodcast.com. And while you're there, let us know what rude questions you've been percolating in your brain. What are you too afraid to Google? We want to know. We want to answer it for you. And you can also follow us on the socials if you're that kind of person. And always, as always, listeners, the most important thing you can do to support the Impolite Society podcast is so simple. It's to tell a friend. You're a smart person, a curious little beaver like we are, so we know that you have other smart, curious friends who wondered this kind of weird shit too. So send them our way. Give us your weird. Give us your curious. Give us your deviant. We want to have them.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, we do.
Chest to chest, baby. And that is it for us. And remember, stay curious and don't ever, ever, ever stop marching to the beat of your own drum. Bum, 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 bum. Making my tracks in my cave.
Getting out my chisel.
Yeah, baby, this one's for you.
Sorry, just looking at you like happily, like
I'm down to the bottom. I need to let it melt.